Yes.
Okay. Now, the topic I have chosen to develop today is that of tasks, right? Which I believe it is something we should have clear in our minds. So I will be sharing the screen. I have prepared a presentation. Let's see how it, how it looks if I have, let's see. Yes, I think it's fine. Can you all see the screen? Yes? Well,
Yes.
the idea is that as I have a full screen now, I cannot see the
Yes.
chat. All right, so if you need to make any questions, right, please let me, just you will have to speak on the microphone, right? Or ask a classmate to let me know, because in the full screen, I cannot see the chat window, okay? Well, activities and task types. Do you know any difference between what activities and tasks are? Any differences you know?
I'm not sure, but I think that in the activities the teacher may be involved, and in the task is just for the student, maybe.
I don't think so, right? Well, in fact,
Okay.
much depends on the way you organize the activity or the task. Let's say how it's going to happen, right? It doesn't have to do with the roles that the teacher has. That is another story, right?
All right.
But take a look. Well, in fact, we may say that a task or an activity is a kind of founding block, right, of all the lessons, right? Whenever there is a lesson, there is an activity, right? An activity or a task. Some authors say that a task may be a bit more complex, and sometimes within a task, there may be different stages or different steps that you have to take, and those are considered like activities within a task, right? But that much depends on authors. Now, broadly speaking, we can say it is any action or set of action that the students perform which involves them using or working with language to attain some specific outcome or outcomes. And when I refer to outcomes, I'm referring to goals, right? Now, when I refer to goals, right, they are the ends of these activities that I have devised. Now, there are two different types of goals that I'm going to mention them, but why is it that I mention them? Because in a way, they condition the type of task or activity you're giving. When students are given a task where there is a learning of a certain skill, right, or about some aspect or some point within the language systems, we say that those tasks or those activities are skill getting. And why do I say skill getting? Because you are learning something that later on will enable you to manage more complex situations. Or perhaps they are the stepping stones towards what? Towards a situation that is closer to the real world. And then as a second category, we may think of those, let's say, tasks or activities that are, let's say, meant to prepare the learners for the real world. And they are, let's say, considered activities that are skill using. What is that? Well, in fact, they recreate possible situations in which the learner may encounter himself or herself in, let's say, using the language, right? Any questions? No?
No.
No questions? Is it clear? Yes? Okay. Then let me move the window. We have activities, right? And we can classify them. This is a very, very general classification of tasks or activities. Drills or mechanic activities or tasks, meaningful activities, and communicative activities, right? Now, I have made a selection, right, of different examples of these, let's say, different types. In a drill or in a mechanical activity, generally, I mean, it's not necessarily grammar. It could be grammar, it could be vocabulary or pronunciation, generally related to the language system, to the hardcore of the language system, is an activity in which the students are not likely to have much of a choice, right, when, let's say, solving it. That is to say, generally, there is one correct response, and it is highly predictable. So, as you can see here, for example, you've got the students have to use a present continuous. The input is a sentence. They are different sentences. They are not related one to the other. And what do they have to do? They have to put the words in the right order. So what is the focus there, apart from being grammar? Is it subject and verb agreement? Is it?
No, because you already have the verb and the subject.
And what is the focus then?
The order in which we say or write the words.
Just the sentence structure, right? And in fact, the students, is meaning concerned? I mean, important in this activity? I wouldn't say so, right? Now, moving on, we have a meaningful task. I would say that the meaningful task is like halfway. It is partly mechanic, let's say mechanical, and partly communicative. And what is it? Because they are a bit more open, right? The students will be manipulating language, but in a restricted way. That is to say, they are predictable. So take a look at this activity. For example, it says, in pairs, read the opening sentence of a story and think of a story that could follow it. Use the questions to help you. When I got on the bus, it was very crowded and I couldn't find a seat. And then, can you see all the questions that follow? Where were you? When were you there? So, perhaps what is unpredictable is the, let's say, information, but the language that will be used in order to answer those prompts and design an answer to this task is highly predictable. All right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, whereas in a communicative task, we always say that there is a frame, right? We set a situation when we give the students a communicative task. But that situation just, let's say, places the learner in time, for example, or in a vocabulary area, but then the learner can use, let's say, all the knowledge he has about the language, right, and of the language in order to solve it. So it says here, work with a partner. Take it in turns to ask and answer the questions. Do you like the idea of learning something new during the summer? Why? Why not? What can you learn and where you live? Can you think of possible answers? I mean, what might the students be using? What language will they use? What do you think? think about forms and vocabulary. Can you predict it?
Maybe use the first person.
The first person we can say, but would you restrict their answers to using like or future or simple present, or I mean, can you say that the students are not likely to use a branch of let's say language devices to give information? In fact, I mean, it is as broad as, let's say, all the verb tenses, because they may refer to something they have done that they did some time ago, and now they want to resume it. So they may use a simple past, and the future they may use a present continuous, saying that they are likely to continue with something they have just started. I mean, or they may even let's say make suggestions. You see, it is really open. That's why it becomes a communicative task. Now, what is it that we are going to, let's say, not assess, but to pay attention to? The fact that the learner answers the question that has been posed. I mean, not specifically question 1 and 2. I mean, the idea, the objective is that they share information and they exchange views and experiences. Okay? You see?
Yes.
That is the difference. Well, and here we can see. Here I have, let's say, included some, let's say, possible activities or tasks that the students may do. And you will see that in some of them, there is only one task or one activity, and in some others, as we mentioned before, there may be a combination of activities within a task. Sometimes we even can, let's say, put them in order and say, this is a pre-task, this is task, and then a follow-up task or follow-up activity. Learners discuss and write some questions in order to make a questionnaire about people's eating habits. So, is it only one task? At first sight, how many activities can you see?
Two.
Learning and writing.
Okay, there is discussing, they have to write questions, and in fact, there is a third one. Then later, they have to make a questionnaire about eating habits. You see? Okay.
Yes.
Then, let me move this because it's bothering me. Then, learners repeat a number of sentences you indicate to improve their pronunciation. And what do you think about this? I mean, I'm not asking you whether they are skill getting or skill using. In fact, sometimes there is a mix, right?
This is only one activity?
It is only one, right? And I would say it's clearly a skill getting one because they are concentrating on pronunciation, right?
Yes.
Take a look. Here it says, learners do a grammar exercise individually and then compare answers with each other. How many steps there? There are 2, okay? Yes, they do a grammar exercise. There could be something about, let's say, like the one we saw before about the present continuous, and then they have to compare their answers and correct each other, swap answers, right? And then learners write a formal letter requesting information about a product. Would you say that that is a skill getting or a skill using?
Skill using.
Yes, because that is a situation they are, I mean, that may occur to them in real life.
I have a question.
Yes.
Could that be both? For example, sometimes when I write letters, I have to look up for words in the dictionary that I don't know, or that I am not sure about, and that enables me to learn new words and learn new vocabulary. Could
Of
an
course.
activity be both?
Yes, but it's not part of a task as a problem-solving activity, right? That is to say, that has not been specified as a step,
All right.
right? You may do it or may not do it. That much depends on the input you have, Ramiro, because if I have given you a frame or I say, well, consult your notes on page to write the letter, then you wouldn't need that, okay? It's
Okay.
not specifically part of the task. You are doing that as a personal decision, okay?
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so let me show you now here. Traditionally, a lesson was regarded as a series of things a teacher does, right? And in fact, the idea is that we change that point of view and start regarding, let's say, a lesson in a completely different way. That is to say, to make learning genuinely useful, we should think of a lesson as a coherent sequence of learner-targeted tasks. So it's flipping, right, traditional thoughts about what learning and what a lesson was, right? Now, any simple activity may be used in a variety of ways. Now, we should never lose sight of the goals. And I want you to take a look at this task. It says, speaking. Which of these firsts do you remember best? Your first home, your first friend, your first hero, your first crush. Well, there you have different, your first broken heart, right? And it says, in using it as a basis for a class activity, which of the following working arrangements would it be possible? For example, students think and then write answers on their own. Students prepare a short monologue statement of their own views, which they then present to the whole class. A whole class discussion of ideas and answers in the way, I mean, it could be a brainstorming session, pair work discussion, small group work, students walk around and mingle with other students, and written homework. These are all possible activities you may do from this input. Of course, you can see that you can combine them. For example, we can think of students think and then write answers on their own, right, about these first, let's say, their first experiences. And then they can walk around and mingle with other students and, let's say, share their information. I may think of students preparing a short monologue, right, starting with their own views, and then prepare as a follow-up activity, as an assignment, I may ask them to write a short paragraph on on one of these, right, of their choice. So you see how from, let's say, some input, I may have different tasks. And within these different tasks or activities, I may integrate skills. I may have, for example, let's say, some skill-getting activities together with some others that are skill-using. So that is the teacher's decision. The idea is that we need to have clear in mind our goals so as to decide how we are going to interplay the different activities. Fine?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Now, I want to check the time because here I cannot see the time. It's past. We can say that the textbook provides you with raw material. That is true. I mean, you've got something like a speaking task like that, but you decide how it best suits your class and the moment it occurs in your lesson. So the idea is never take things, let's say, to the letter. Adapt the activities, adapt the input, adapt all the, let's say, the pre-tasks that you have in the textbooks to, let's say, make teaching and students learning really profitable and motivating, especially, right? And that is the, let's say, the task that all and the challenge that all teachers have in their jobs. You may say, oh no, I don't want to follow a textbook because a textbook conditions you to do activities. No, in fact, that is not true. In fact, you are the one that decides on what is to be done with the textbook. Now, the problem arises when you adopt a textbook and you don't think that any activity is good enough for your students. So in that case, you have to reflect and think about changing the textbook. But what are the benefits of textbooks? They provide you with, let's say, orderly work on all the skills. You have progression, grading. That's why, I mean, I think that textbooks are necessary and they are most helpful for teachers. But the choice should be cautious, of course. Now, when we are to create or to choose a task, we may have different ways in which we may conduct it. Now, it may be individual work, pair work, small groups from 3 to 6 students. Then we can think of large groups. For example, when you are preparing a game, right? And you divide the class into 2 or 3 groups. Then the whole class mingle and the whole class plenary. What is the whole class mingle? It is that a task when you ask the students to stand up and start asking questions at random to different people, right? It's not that they have to find somebody, but they can ask questions or, let's say, exchange information with any other classmate. And whole class plenary, it is what we say in lockstep. That is another way to work in lockstep. It means when the teacher is, let's say, working with the students all together, right? As a whole, right? As one unit. For example, now, what kind of, let's say, way are we using now at this moment?
Plenary.
Yes, we are working as a whole class. I am the one that is speaking, but I interact with you, right? It's not that you have a specific role that you have to discuss one of the questions, or I make a question and you have to do it in groups. I have not commanded that. Okay, everybody is let's say, invited to join in and to ask questions whenever you want. You see? Do you see
Yes.
the difference between the whole class mingle and the whole class plenary? Yes? So whenever you plan a task, you have to think about this, right? How are you going to work, right? How is this task meant to be done? Now, the idea is, right, if we want to have a successful class, then we need to vary this, right? We cannot keep our, let's say, lessons doing individual work all the time, for example. The same happens with the whole class mingle or pair work. Or even within pair work, it is a good idea that from time to time, you vary the participants in a pair. Okay? Well, then there is an activity roadmap. And what is that? It is in 2 slides. You will see that there is a second one, right? Well, these are the steps that we take whenever we start an activity or a task that has different steps. Before the lesson, what should you do? You have to be familiar with the materials and the activities involved. And that has to do with what? With, let's say, devising copies that you need, devising, let's say, perhaps visual stimuli that you are going to use, and then the preparation or lead-in. That is to say, what are you going to do there? In the preparation or lead-in, you think about all the resources that are likely to motivate the students or catch their attention. So how are you going to, let's say, introduce this task? Are you going to ask them to brainstorm, for example? Then, setting up an action plan. It may involve pair work, individual one, or moving around. That is what we were discussing. Then, running the activity. That is while the students are doing. What is your role during this time when the students are solving the activity, working? If they are in pairs, if they are working in large groups, well, are you going to monitor them from the very start? Are you going to be close to them? Well, in fact, it has to do with the roles of the teacher. Then we're going to analyze that. Okay, but never, it is advisable never to be very intrusive. Sometimes teachers tend to be close to the students to monitor them and interrupt them, or sometimes they may feel intimidated because the teacher is nearby. Then, closing and rounding up. It is a good idea to establish, right, set up the time, right, when the activity is meant to be finished, and let's say indicate the time is near to run out, okay, so as to let's say prevent from having abrupt ends and the students feeling a bit frustrated because they couldn't finish it or they couldn't come to conclusions, etc. And then, most important is this part, that of feedback or correction. When I may say feedback, if the activity was mainly meaningful or communicative, perhaps what you do is to speak in general, and if you have taken notes while you were monitoring them, you give them feedback in general. And it may be correction that is more meticulous work, especially if the task has been that of, let's say, focusing on grammar, pronunciation, or vocabulary, right? Let me, okay, if I stop sharing. Well, I think I have done well with the timing. Any questions? Here I have something in the chat. Let me see. It says, could you provide an example of each? I don't know which are you referring to, Emiliano? An example of what? Okay. You mean an example of the activities? That's what you meant, right? Yes, then they were, all right? I read your mind. That's why you had them, some. Now, the idea is that I have recorded like a sort of summary of this PowerPoint, right? And I will upload it onto the Google Classroom, and you will have access to this lesson, and those people who were not here will be able to watch it as we always do, right? But then there is a kind of presentation that I prepared using one of the apps to have this PowerPoint for you to revise it in case you have some doubts, okay? Do you have a clear idea now about these task types? Because you are going to study in didactics tasks and activities, And you're going to do so when you study David Noonan's book. He has a very, let's say, let's concrete, I would say, and clear way of devising tasks and analyzing the different elements of tasks. Now, I need a broader, let's say, outlook on it for the observation, right, that you will be conducting. We really don't know. We still haven't got any answers, right? Because we really don't know what's going to happen with the lockdown. But apparently, it will be next year. You will be doing the observations, apparently, unless they decide on, let's say, finishing the lockdown. But I don't think that is going to happen this term. So we will be working on this, right, on the theoretical frame, and let's say, perhaps watching some clips that I have found, but I have already made a selection. But the problem is that there is a problem with the format of the DVD that I have, and my computer doesn't read them. So I will see if I can upload them into YouTube, right? Okay,
Yes.
any questions? No?
No.
Okay. As you are writing here, don't adopt, adapt. That is true. And well, perhaps what I will do is to, I wanted you to give me examples the other day, remember, on Piaget, right? Remember we spoke about that you were going to give me examples on assimilation and adaptation. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay, so what I would like you to do is to see if you can prepare that for the next session that will be on Wednesday, right? And you will be the ones that will be sharing the screen. All right?
Okay.
And was it something else? I think there was something else we were supposed to discuss. Who can remind me?